This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and we want to welcome you to another podcast of the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And we want to thank the many new listeners that we have over the last couple of weeks. And again, we want to remind you to participate with us because I know Candace would like to maybe talk to somebody in addition to me. So, Candace, tell us about today's subject, embracing conflicts.
So this concept comes from the work of Liane Davey, and so we've been talking about her book, The Good Fight, and material from that. And she has free YouTube videos and so on. But the idea is, as you mentioned just before we got on, embracing conflict isn't necessarily something that we all think about doing or culturally and just our basic personal MO. Most people aren't going to walk into wrestling the bear, so to speak. All right. But actually, it's a good thing to embrace it. All right.
Okay.
So we talked in the last couple of times in terms of it's going to be there. Whatever the underlying problem is probably going to be there. And unless and until we can address it, it can continue to eat away at us, kind of like a cancer in the relationship or problem solving on a particular project. And although Ms. Davey's book is primarily focusing on teamwork in the business setting, it can be the same thing with families, just like we talked about with the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, that a lot of those concepts, you can bring just to your daily life, the thinking above the line and below the line.
Right.
And those kinds of things. So the idea is that at a minimum, consistent with the whole concept of the intentionality gurus, is just to notice when we have these moments in our daily interactions, in our thoughts, about what we are tolerating. We can pay attention to our body compass that we've talked about in prior podcasts and just notice those little forks in the roads where conflict is arising and we either say something or we don't, or we say something and then we immediately back off from it. So any moments for you that immediately come to mind?
Lots of moments, but this past week, a huge moment comes to mind because I chose to do a podcast with an individual, which I knew was going to be highly controversial. But I felt it was important to talk about because I've talked about this subject in the past. And I knew that there was going to be some shit thrown at me for doing it, so to speak.
Some haters.
Yep. And, there's only one hater who commented online so far. The rest has been privately to my phone, which I've been blocking numerous phone numbers recently. But again, I stand behind what I did because it was important, not just to me, but to so many people. And when it first started to upset me, my husband and my son actually sat me down and they said, "Do you think you did a good thing?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Then you need to find a way not to let these people upset you." And so I thought about it for a little bit and I started to realize, you know what? There's always going to be haters in this world. And as long as you can stand behind what you're doing, um, you can grow a thicker skin. And so that's what I've done.
That's such a wonderful example because it really illustrates that you could have, shied away from it after the comments started coming in.
Right.
And then that would color how you behave possibly going forward. But by being able to raise a topic and just put it out there on the table and people can pull it forward towards themselves or they can push it back on you, that's where that boundary is, that,
Right.
You're not shoving it on people, you're just raising the topic. And, that's kind of one of the themes in Miss Davey's book, but it's also just with the intentionalities in terms of noticing when just raising our awareness and noticing opportunities where we're either being a bystander, that's the term she uses in her book, or we're being a participant. And so when we are being a bystander and we're not speaking up, and it doesn't mean we have to be pounding the table or, doing anything violent. It could just mean respectfully raising a topic. In one of the groups to which I belong, we call it respectful pushback.
Okay.
But it gives the others an opportunity to at least perhaps speak what others are not willing to say, and address that. And then we can catch ourselves in the act when we do that. And so that's what we're going to explore today.
Okay.
All right. So some of the things I really loved in the book are basically the idea of realizing up front that we're all going to have a different tolerance level. We're going to be somewhere on a spectrum of what we consider conflict. I had a friend who was an attorney, and she often would handle hearings in a particular context. And I had observed her, and one time she felt as if she had been very confrontational and aggressive in the hearing. And I observed the entire thing, and I noticed none of that.
Okay.
But for her, it was fraught with tension, and she was doing everything she could to be nice and to be an effective advocate. She didn't give up any ground, but it was interesting to me to hear her self-assessment that she had been really forceful. That was the last thing I noticed. All right. So the point is that we all have a different comfort level and a different awareness about where we have how we define conflict and how it impacts us.
Absolutely.
And I even had a office mate who was a litigator. And so litigators often have a reputation, as do many subcategories, of kind of going from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. And this was one of those people. I used to think of him as like a little terrier dog that had a grip with his teeth on your pant leg, and he would not let go. And over some of the silliest things, and it took me a while because I wasn't familiar with him prior to those interactions, to just recognize this is how so-and-so is. It's not impacting me. I can just watch the TV screen and watch him, boil over, and then he generally calms down, and then he can be reasonable. And actually, he wasn't a bad guy. He just had an unfortunate communication style.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because my youngest son is very much like that. And, for years, we let it totally affect my husband and myself. And because it was affecting us, it created more of a storm here in the house. And most recently, what we've been doing is when he goes off on one of these tangents, we just let him do it. We don't interrupt. We don't engage other than, watching him. And usually when he's done, he walks out of the room like nothing happened, and, he's fine. And we're learning to be fine rather than to be carrying whatever his burden was that he was, throwing out to the universe.
Yeah. So he's on the other side of it. I'm glad I got that out of my system.
Yep. Right. Exactly.
But not foisting it on y'all.
Exactly.
Right. So the idea is, in the context of teams at work, it's very obvious where that would be relevant, but also within families, just as you mentioned. And the thing we can be more conscious of is how our bystanderedness or participantness contributes to the culture over time. So whether we're consciously, intentionally creating a culture of toleration, our own toleration against, how do I want to say it more precisely, our toleration for not speaking up when something needs to be addressed because we are afraid of conflict, versus having a more candid conversation around, what are the rules of engagement we're going to have here.
Okay.
And we've talked about that in some of the prior calls, and whether or not it's enforced, because a lot of organizations, including families, can have the articulated policy, it's, you can say anything. We're here, we're supportive, but the underlying message is it's not safe. Right. So I certainly have experienced that. And sometimes it's topic specific, but nonetheless, sometimes it pays not to speak up in some settings. The thing that pays is noticing. That's the key. That's a common denominator with everything that we're talking about in these podcasts. One of the things Liane Davey points out is that everyone pays for other people's hypersensitivity to conflict. So if it's not comfortable, if there's someone on the team, someone in the family who is too sensitive and people aren't allowed to be candid, then it can really whipsaw what's going on in the family. And, as much as I love my mother, who's now deceased, my mom was a very uber sensitive person, and she would personalize things. And it was really difficult because there was never any intent to hurt her feelings. Most of the time, I would imagine. But the idea was, somebody might say something candidly, and then her feelings would be hurt. Like, well, how could you say that? You would hurt my feelings. So killjoy is the term that comes to mind. So the other distinction I really loved in the book is just noticing the distinction between being nice and being kind. So what are your thoughts about that?
Wow, the difference between nice and kind. I would think nice would be more of a natural response, and kind might be more of, I'm just not going to get involved, and so holding back.
It's actually a bit the other way around. So nice is, there's nothing wrong with being nice. The problem is noticing when, or the potential problem is not noticing when we're being nice to avoid conflict rather than speaking up. All right.
Okay.
And the idea is that sometimes we can buy some short-term peace by being nice and not speaking up, but it takes its toll in the long term. So sometimes it's kinder to say something now before it's really become entrenched and that culture, is embedded and so on, and be a constructive contributor to resolving the underlying upset. All right.
Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
So conflict is good for all of us. I mean, we're not talking about the litigator kind of idea of conflict. There were many episodes with this particular person, and it's, I got to the point where watching that TV screen, how this person behaved, is like, oh my Lord, this is so out of proportion to, somebody dropped a pencil. All right, we're not going to have a volcano go off. All right. So the idea is whether we're being nice to avoid possible drama, that kind of thing. And the irony is that many times we lapse into the niceness to avoid drama and tears and emotions. So it's kind of like an emotional blackmail. And it's not meant that the other person is necessarily conscious about it, but we can just be sensitive to it. We can just notice it. So the idea also is that we can, similar to a lot of what we covered in the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, even in our personal setting, is to notice when we're above the line and below the line. So when we're above the line, we're open, like, what can I learn from the situation? Below the line is, oh my Lord, I'm being victimized here, somebody's attacking me, or this is just uncomfortable. But so we can proactively start to pay attention and adopt this new mindset in order to overcome the underlying contributing causes to the conflict and replace the spectator mode with the participant mode.
Well, one of the things I find is I find myself flip-flopping. And I'll give you an example. On Friday, I took on some extra hours for my weekend job. And one of the young guys that was working there, his job is to sell. And person came in, and I had been working with them, and I had them sold on a package. Okay. But he was standing close by and he said, Karen, do you need any help? And I was going to hand over the sale to him anyways. And I said, this is what the person would like. And, they're pretty firm on it. He goes, okay, but I have one other idea. And I thought, okay, there's, lots of product in the store. And he walked them over to my competitor's product. And I don't think he meant to do it now, now that I look back. Okay. So in the beginning, I was basically above the line. I was talking to him, maybe there is something else, that I'm not thinking of. And then when he said, oh, I have an idea, and then he walks him over to my competitor's product, I definitely went right below the line. Like, you're out to get me, why are you doing this? But I didn't say anything. I tried, it was polite. Um, and as it turns out, he did sell my competitor's product. But afterwards, I said, I need to talk to you about something. And I took myself above the line at that point because I knew I needed to be calm. And I didn't want to assume that he really was attacking me. And the result was he wasn't. Okay. He just saw that this person could save another $50, wasn't thinking of the fact that it was my competitor's product. And, he started going into defense mode. And I said, no, now I understand. Okay. I said, but do you understand that when I'm here and I've already put something together, we need to work together on that deal? And he goes, absolutely. But I found myself, very calm up here. And then either watching his body language or some of the words he used, I felt like I was being attacked. And then I was like, no, I'm okay. So my question to you is this normal or am I just schizophrenic?
No, I think you perfectly illustrate a couple of different things. So one, you noticed, you caught it. You had that emotional intelligence informed by the 15 commitments of conscious leadership below the line, above the line, or above, below, back, above. And so you had tools where you could apply your attention, intention proactively rather than just being at the mercy. Because what would it have been like before you had those kinds of insights?
Oh, I mean, in the past, it would have been, he's going to get it. I'm just going to walk away. And then I'm going to be angry inside. And I'm not going to know if I should talk to him or not.
We label, we distance.
Right.
And then what do we have? We have an impasse and we have more of a problem than we had in that one moment.
Exactly.
So, that's the just a wonderful, wonderful example. The other part is that these things do grow like a cancer. So, you don't have to, just the fact that you didn't handle it in the moment that he was making that recommendation of the other product is key, because you were still able to handle it somewhat contemporaneously while he could still remember it and so on. And you could be in touch with your own emotions, what was going on in your body compass, but also be sensitive to the potential we have for mind reading. So that's the cognitive behavioral therapy paradigm of the event. What are our thoughts about the event? What are our feelings? And then what those drive the behavior. So just being aware of, okay, I'm detaching, I'm standing outside myself, what's going on here, looking at this, not without emotion, but with some distance, so you can get a better handle on it. So I love it.
Well, and I repeated it. I talked to him today because we worked together today, and I sort of thanked him for letting me, explain to him where I was coming from. And he looked at me. I mean, he's a young kid. He just graduated high school. Okay. And he really wants to, do well at this job. He wants plenty of hours to help him, pay for school. But he said to me, thank you for explaining it to me the way you did. He said, because in the past where he has worked, he would have just been, you know, told what a terrible thing you did. And I said, no, it wasn't terrible, you know. Um, and my life didn't depend on that sale. And that was the other thing that I had to step back and realize. My life, my job, nothing terrible is going to happen to me, if he, sells my competitor's product. But I just want a conversation to understand that, hey, I'm giving you my time. I'm here. Um, and so, we need to find a way to work together a little bit more cohesively. And yeah, I feel so good about that, that it's like in the past, I wouldn't have done that. I just would have harbored in being upset.
Yeah, and I just love the idea that what you're also doing is you're, you know, acting in a way that encourages trust, teamwork, true teamwork, not just being on the same team,
Right.
but actually working together in a team way. And you didn't force him to have to mind read, that
Right.
you were upset about something.
Right.
And you didn't have to attack him. You merely stated, what was so, put it out there on the table for y'all to, talk about and so on. And that just, that's the building of the team culture. How are we going to agree to interact with each other and so on? There's a bunch of things that come to mind, but one of the concepts is the terms of agreement or the terms of engagement. How do we
Right.
agree to work together as a team? And part of it is, being candid. The phrase I use is being candid, but be kind. And that other group that I belong to, as I said, calls it respectful pushback. But how can we make this work more effectively?
Right.
So then that opens the door to getting to root causes. And one of the other statistics Liane Davey mentions, and I've read it elsewhere, is there's a study, and I think it was at MIT, that said the number one predictor of team performance is the team being attentive to teammates' emotional states, rather than labeling somebody as too sensitive. And as a middle child who was too sensitive for my family, anytime I would raise something, I was being too sensitive. And so I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel, understood, blah, 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 blah. And it's not like I have any issues going on anymore about that. But anyway, much. It probably wouldn't be on this path if I hadn't. But the idea is that to create that culture where you can calmly, rationally, and kindly, not always nicely, but kindly ask questions to find out what the root cause is, so that you're not going to have to deal with it later.
Right.
Maybe with a different teammate when they get up to speed and so on. And maybe another teammate has ideas, but it's just, in a phrase, almost too obvious, right?
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
how much of it doesn't go on? And we have a lot of examples in our society these days, that SUV mentality of my way or the highway thinking.
Well, and it's interesting because my youngest son, um, he's a very good communicator at work. He's not as good a communicator at home. And so
he's relaxed at home.
Exactly. And, I've understood that for a long time. My husband has not. And he'll say to me, I don't understand how everybody, at work can love him, understand him, and, he said, but he comes home and, he's forceful. And I said, well, think about it. I said, this is his safe zone. We all do things differently at home than we do outside the home. And I said, and if he's being so helpful and kind and all these other terms at work and trying to keep it together, I said, he's got to come home and let it out, because, he needs to work through it. And my husband will just look at me and go, nah, I don't understand. I'm the same way at work as I am at home. And it's like, I know you are, but you're you.
Something we might need to talk about.
Yeah. Interesting.
So the thing about the book, what appealed to me so much, I mean, there are a lot of books I read that appealed to me, but I just saw the interconnection with the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, emotional IQ, the tolerations. You know, when I came home that one day telling my husband that I was going to practice the habit of intoleration, and he said, "Wonderful, dear, wonderful." And I said, "No," I said, "intolerations. I'm going to be intolerant." And he like shrunk back like I was going to be a nasty person or something. No, no, I'm just going to notice all the things that I say yes to or acquiesce to, and just be more conscious about it. And that was a real pivot in my life when I did that. And I forget, you know, it wasn't anything in particular at that point I read, except the idea of saying yes to too many things, because I was being nice. Right. And, you know, it's just paying attention, just noticing. And we talk about that in almost every podcast, about noticing gives you that opportunity to see the fork in the road, where you have a chance to either take a different path or approach to something versus the one that you habitually take because you're not even noticing there is a fork in the road. And you can always back up and go down the original road if the new one doesn't work out.
Well, keeping your eyes open is very, very important. And you know, this sort of reflects what happened to me earlier today. Um, since my cataract surgery, I only need reading glasses or to look at the computer screen like I am right now. And so I have glasses all over the house. And I have extra glasses in my car. But I traded cars with my son this morning because he went on a road trip and he has way too many miles on his car. So I didn't have glasses in his car. And I got to work and everything I had to do up close, I could not see. And I kept using the phrase, I have to be open. I have to be able to see everything around me. And so one of the guys who really needs glasses um, went over and they have reading glasses where I work. Not many. I think there's one pair left. So he went and bought this pair of reading glasses, which he said he was going to need. And he came up to me and he said, "You may borrow these before I need them." Well, they were not the right magnification. They were way too strong. But because he offered them to me and was being so nice, I had, or kind, whatever words we want to use.
He was being nice.
Yeah. I wore them on the tip of my nose and tried to use them the whole time. And afterwards, I put them back in the box and I said, you know, the company does have a policy that you can return things up to 14 days after you purchase it. So if you really don't need these anymore, maybe you should return them. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I was going to do that anyways."
Got it.
So, you know, but being open and keeping your eyes open and, you know, being honest with people. I mean, that's the first thing I did when I got to work today. I said, "Guys, I can't read any of the fine print. So I'm going to need your help."
And it's all fine print after a certain time, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And they were, and you know, they all were like, anything you need. But I could have been like I had been many years ago, not telling anybody because not wanting to draw attention to a deficit. And in fact, we just had fun with it the whole time, you know. "Hey, Karen, can you read my lips?" And it's like, that I can do. Just can't read the fine print.
How many fingers am I holding up?
Right, exactly.
Well,
Well,
glad you had that outcome. So I just recommend, you know, I can't imagine a person not benefiting from reading the book. It's called The Good Fight by Liane, Liane. Yes, Liane Davey, Davey.
well, we will make sure we put that in the show notes. And again, if you're listening to this podcast, let us know what you're getting out of it. Because I'll tell you that um, I may not always realize why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking or why I'm doing something the way I'm doing it. But in the long run, I'm finding that I'm making less problems for myself. And that's a good feeling.
It's nice to hear. Thank you.
Have a great day, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye bye now.